Yes. Okay, so now I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to Diane Sears so that she can begin our journey through learning all about Heidi and with the winning strategies with the WBE.
All right, thank you, Joanna. I appreciate that. It's such a pleasure to introduce Heidi. I met Heidi when I did her site visit. Gosh, I can't remember how many years ago, 3, 4, and was so excited to meet her because she's in such a creative field. And I'm in journalism and I'm in event production on a different side. And so Heidi has a company that's all about producing events and making them really big and special. And Heidi, I know you'll be able to describe it better than that. So tell us about Technisch Creative first and how you got started and when you started your business.
Sure. Well, we started over 21 years ago in Las Vegas. I was a performer and my husband was head of sound and video at the Mirage. And I decided to quit performing, dancing, to start a company because the last show I did was I was a dancer and magic assistant for Siegfried and Roy. And being an ambitious person, there's nowhere to go once you're in the show. You don't get a promotion. Siegfried had Roy, Roy had Siegfried. So I started the company as an entertainment company at first and evolved into an event management company. I went back to school and studied at UNLV, which has a really great program, as you can imagine, for events. And started the company really as a home-based company 21 years ago and had a baby, decided to raise her closer to family. So my husband and I relocated to Lansing, Michigan, and really kind of grew out of the home-based event planning company and got our own storefront, and both went full-time at that point. So it was all or nothing at that point. And Lansing's nothing like Las Vegas, so we really had to figure out how to do things differently. We eventually grew into a focus of specifically the production side, using his technical background and my performance background. So we focus on turning the meetings into a show. It's a little bit different than your dry chicken dinner where you have just a talking head on stage. We integrate music and entertainment and lighting and special effects and lots of graphics with video, but really just try to boost the engagement. We opened our Florida office, it's been about 8 years ago now, and we were having our best year yet when COVID hit. And as many of you know or can imagine, the event industry, I would say that it was one of the biggest hits of any industry. Obviously, travel has taken a big hit. There are other industries that everyone would agree took a big hit, but the events industry really came to a screeching halt. So I spent about 2 weeks, in lockdown at the beginning, and got I think I went through the 5 stages of acceptance.
Yeah.
So I was depressed, I was angry, I had a really hard time accepting that we were considered non-essential. So for about 2 weeks, I did all of the research I could do to find loans and just follow what other people were doing. I honestly did believe at the time that we would only be locked down for 2 or 3 weeks. So
I remember you talking about that. You said, I'm just going to hang on until it comes back because it will come back. And you were absolutely right. It will, but
maybe a little longer than 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to get both the PPP and the EIDL loan very early on. I think I was the first person that I know that got both. So we immediately came back to the office and got to work, hired back some of our, hired back all of the full-time, and then brought back some of our freelancers who were kind of on-call employees, and we reinvented. We built out a studio in our office, and we wired the entire office space. We've got about 10,000 square feet of office and warehouse. So we wired everything so that we can essentially stream from basically every room. and we built a hands-free studio. So anyone who still needs to get their message out, whether it's a commercial or they're addressing their employees or their members of an association, they could literally come in the door, never have contact with anyone. We set up robotic cameras, overhead microphone, lighting would be preset before they walk in. So anyone that had any concerns can come right in and stream their message or their event, even entertainment. Entertainers have come in to stream their shows from in there.
That's a pretty big pivot that you made, Heidi. And you actually just did a big show today for another of our WeBank members. Talk about that a little bit and what it took to produce the show for Francis.
Yeah, that's right.
Francis
so,
Rios.
Shout out to Francis Rios. She did a fantastic job today, and we'll have the second day of her conference tomorrow. And Diane, thank you, because you're the one that introduced us. And funny enough, you introduced us literally right as COVID was becoming an issue. It was at the awards luncheon at the country club, and I sat at the table, and because I felt like my business was being affected, unlike a lot of other industries. I asked the rest of the table, who's feeling the effects of COVID? And funny enough, everyone nodded their head and said, we all are, regardless of what the industry is. But Francis and I started talking at that luncheon, and never even dreamed of a lockdown, never thought that this would go so far. So we started talking about her live event back then, and kept in contact and reconnected actually on one of these webinar Zoom calls. So she was kind of in this place of trying to figure out how to reinvent her conference, and we were reinventing ourselves and creating this service. So it was a great opportunity to work together and form a relationship that will hopefully thrive well into the future.
So that's one way you've pivoted, but then you and I were talking the other day, and it looks like you've pivoted in another big way. And tell us about the Bewell Con, your new venture.
Yeah, well, so I was still kind of stuck on this is only going to last for 2 or 3 weeks, and then maybe a couple months, and now here we are getting into fall, and I, being very antsy, I decided not to just wait for clients to figure out what they want to do next, and we decided to create our own thing. So we launched Bewell TV, which is an online TV network hosted on YouTube currently, while we grow it. But the idea is that we address all topics of wellness, not specifically to the current situation, but something that will last forever. And it's wellness of mind, body, and spirit. So there are topics, or we plan topics that range from fitness, healthy eating, meditation, spiritual healing, but also legal wellness, content about, your right insurance policy, financial wellness, other topics that are also important to everyone when they think about how they feel, because it's about just bettering themselves internally. So with that, Bewell TV, as we're launching that, we also, because we're very passionate about live events and anxious to meet again, we're launching Bewell Con. The first one is going to be at the Orange County Convention Center on December 5th. We decided not to wait, because we did a conference for the events industry in July at the Orange County Convention Center, and it kind of served as proof of concept that said, listen, we know that it's not the same as it used to be, but it's possible to meet again. We can get together in groups as long as it's legal, as long as we're allowed in our municipality, in our space. We're gonna have to take some extra steps. You'll probably have to wear a mask. You'll probably have to wash your hands more frequently, distancing, all of the things. Things will be different, but it is possible to do. And we had a very successful event in July. So since we demonstrated that it could be done, we just didn't want to wait and see what happens next. We decided to kind of take the bull by its horns and take that leap. So now—
that's so exciting. Tell us now, about who is speaking at that, or what you have planned for that, and how people can get involved in the Bewell TV and Bewell Con.
Sure. So at the Bewell Con, we'll have 3 stages, Well Mind, Well Body, and Well Spirit. On the Well Body stage, as you might expect, we will have fitness instructors. So it's a day full of a variety of fitness classes, from yoga to Zumba to Qigong, HIIT, ballroom dance. So lots of physical activity. On the Well stage, we will have content. We're still working with lining up the speakers, but our hope is that we have legal content, doctors' presentations, furthering education. We have one session called Play, 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 and Play Some More, and it's about having fun at work. And then on the Spirit stage, we have some things that are really about self-reflection, meditation, breathing exercises, a lot of stuff that we rarely stop and think about, let alone pay attention to.
Right. That sounds exciting.
Yeah.
And you're doing this all at the Orange County Convention Center. I just wrote an article about them. It hasn't even been published yet, about all the precautions they're taking to make sure people feel safe. So what did you notice when you went in there? I know, and what are they talking to you about, as you set up this conference about safety?
Yeah, so they're very helpful in communicating what kinds of regulations there are, but also what steps they're taking above and beyond just regulations with their sanitation. They're, they spray their chairs between sessions and seatings, so they're sanitized. They're assisting with signage around the building to encourage people to maintain their distance and to wash their hands frequently. They have hand sanitizers in public spaces. So they've been very helpful with obviously letting us know what the regulations are, but then supporting us in connecting us to security and healthcare providers or first aid providers. So we have those resources on site.
Okay. Well, I'm going to ask if my teammates who are monitoring the chats can see if there are any questions. So if anybody has any questions for Heidi about any of her business ventures. But then Heidi, I have another question for you. And as you've been making these transitions and pivoting, what have you found to be the most challenging part of that?
Well, there's no doubt that just not knowing what's going to happen next has been the most challenging, but also getting the message out to people that there are safe ways to move forward. There are a lot of people that are still very, very concerned. And I think that even though the virus is still here, there are a lot of precautions that you can take to be safe and still leave your home. You can be active again. A lot of the restaurants, here in Central Florida, we're back at 100% capacity, and restaurants have been very good. All of the restaurants I've been to anyway have been very good about their protocols and their servers wearing masks and, all of their sanitation practices. So I
got barriers between tables and things like that. Yeah,
exactly. So I think really convincing people that it's okay to take that next step has been the biggest challenge.
Heidi, I think you are one of the, one of our companies here in Central Florida that is somewhat larger than some of the other businesses. What kind of advice would you give to a certified women-owned business looking to grow?
That's funny because I don't consider myself a larger business, but
I know it's funny. But you do. You have how many employees do you have?
Well, it depends on the season. Right now we have 4 full-time that come into the office, but obviously we're in an industry that we have on-call employees that when we have events, we increase the labor. I would just say, have the guts to do what you want to do. Taking this leap to put together this conference and this TV network it's something that's been in the back of my head for years. But I just never had the courage. Not that I didn't have the courage. I just didn't take that step. I just didn't. So it was kind of good to have this situation that forced me to take it. So I think, you're going to have failures in life. The more failures you have, the more you get them out of the way and you have success.
Well, back in the days when you were on stage with Siegfried and Roy back in Las Vegas, did you ever dream that that you'd have a company and that you'd be doing such great things here in Orlando and other parts of the world?
I think I did, because I always had the entrepreneurial spirit. So I think I did always believe that I would own a business and that it would be successful.
Oh, that's great. And I want to see if anybody else, we only have a few more minutes left. Does anybody else have any questions?
Actually, Diane and Heidi, I have a couple of questions. So Heidi, thank you so much for sharing your great story with us. And I want to take you back for a minute to, the dark days of the 5 stages that you went through, and help WBEs understand what you actually did. I remember early days of the pandemic, the council was meeting regionally every evening. I think it was at 7. I don't remember what time, but Monday it was one part, Tuesday it was another. And I remember that you attended several of the Orlando meetings, right, where we were just talking about what's going on and what's next. So can you kind of, by way of just take us through your story so that other people can see what thought processes you had? Because I do remember that it was pretty dark days for you, right? Because it was going to mean a radical shift.
Yeah. I think I didn't let it last long. I never saw it as impending doom. I think the biggest part of that time for me was just my anger and frustration that we were considered non-essential. So every time I got another email from a client saying they were canceling or postponing their events, I was like, no. But ultimately, like I was constantly, well, what can we do instead? What can we do next? That's why food truck, people still need to eat. And if we're driving around, then we don't have to worry about, whether or not the restaurant has to be closed. I thought, I started thinking of any kind of idea I could come up with. I think I got my daughter kind of attached to the food truck idea because now she's down that path. She wants to do that. But
I remember you talked about doing drive-in movies.
We did some drive-in movies. We never really expected to monetize that, but it was a great way. I felt that it was very important that we stay present in people's minds. So it was an important way for us to bring our freelancers, our employees, our peers, and potentially clients or new contacts. It was an important way to bring them together because a lot of them were frustrated, stuck at home. And I guess it was just kind of a feel-good opportunity that kept us alive, kept us relevant.
Yeah, I think if I can state the obvious, the lesson is to give yourself the time that you need to accept where you are, right? Because in any transition, we have to first kind of acknowledge that we're in transition, and then we have to accept that we're in this transition, and then we have to decide, okay, what are we going to do next, right? Because you can acknowledge up one way and down the other, but until you've actually said, okay, it's here, and this is the reality, and now here's how I'm going to move forward. And to your point, your way of moving forward, I think, is very inspirational to our members because you didn't try just one thing, right? You looked at food trucks, then you were looking at the drive-in movie idea, right? All in an effort to keep your name out there and to keep your employees and your people engaged, because that's the other thing too. As business leaders, we are not only responsible for ourselves, but we're also responsible for our teams, right? And the morale of our teams. And this idea of we have to keep innovating. And I really admire that, that you were able to do that. right? That you're able to bring your team together to say, okay, what are these other ideas that we can look at? And at what point, this is my other question, at what point did you decide, okay, this has changed my industry? It's not a temporary fix that I'm looking at, but I'm looking at, 5-10 years out, this is what this industry is going to look like. At what point did you decide that and decide to go into the Bewell TV?
Well, I will admit I'm probably still one of the stubborn people that believes we will come back, but I have accepted that it's going to take at least a couple years before it gets back to where it was for our industry. And I don't think it ever will be the same. I think that virtual is going to be around forever. It's going to be a staple and will be integrated into live events.
Yeah.
I also think some events will never come back simply because so many people have learned the ease of using virtual events so they can eliminate the travel. But I have been pretty stubborn about accepting that 100%. However, I really enjoy this path that we've taken with Bewell TV and Bewell Con because it's something that I'm very passionate about, and it combines the health and wellness that I enjoy, and I think it's important to people, and it integrates the event and broadcast experience that we have. So I think even if events don't come back the way they were, I'm really excited about the path that we're on.
We do have a question from the Q&A, and actually it's from Sam Hines, our board chair. He's asking your advice, Heidi, on how do we prepare the next generation to be business owners? You mentioned you're a mom, and I know you're passionate about this. What kind of advice would you give to the next generation?
Well, I would definitely encourage them to start working as soon as they can. I know my daughter, I joked when she was really young, she kept, like every day she'd start a new business. She actually started one called Reduce, Reuse, Recycle at one point, and she took our scraps and our trash from our business and literally sold them back to our employees.
That's amazing. You raised her well.
So I think encouraging them to work some way or another is important, so they learn work ethics. And then I think, sometimes, a lot of times I feel like I don't set the best example, and I know that there are ways that I could set a better example. But the younger generation watches what we do, so they're going to mimic what we do.
Yeah.
So I think demonstrate and communicate what you do, with your own children or with your mentees. Communicate what it is that you do so they understand it and can determine what's right and wrong for them.
Yeah. Carmen on our team said that she admires how you took charge and looked at what to do next, and gave yourself the time that you needed to accept the reality and accept that it was time to move forward, and that you didn't limit yourself to one thing. And I think she's wrapped that up kind of the way Nancy said, and that diversifying was really helpful for you during this pivoting time and has been. What's next? What do you think you'll get into next?
Well, next for me, I think, is really developing Bewell TV. My hope is that it grows into a very successful network that Oprah wants to buy from us someday.
Yes.
Beautiful. From your mouth to the universe's ears. How can, as as you know, Heidi, we have lots of members who've got incredible things to share, right? So are you open to having people send you ideas or pitch to you something for Bewell TV, and how can we do that?
100%. My email, and I'll add it to the chat, is Heidi@technischcreative.com, and we interview. We have one show specifically called Women Have Needs Too, and the host, Linda Q, actually interviews women business owners and successful women regularly. So that's a great show to be on. And then, as I mentioned, we're introducing other shows as we grow. So there's a lot of opportunity. we would love to hear people's stories and interest if they want to be on.
Great. Thank
I
you.
have a question for Heidi. What tips could you give people in doing virtual events that is different from doing live events? Something that we could be aware of? What are some of the pitfalls maybe of doing a virtual event?
Well, I think understanding the different types of virtual events, because, you know, we're on a virtual event right now with a Zoom call. But you can also watch the Oscars is a virtual event. The ball drop from Times Square for New Year's Eve is going to be a virtual event, which is kind of funny to me because my reaction was, well, hasn't it always, like, I've always watched it on the TV, so what's different? I think really understanding what, I think eventually we'll come up with some new terms, so we break it down into categories, but understand whether you're broadcasting or whether you want interactivity, because they're very different and they require different platforms and different technologies. And sometimes you want to broadcast, but you want to have interaction, and that becomes a little more complex. So they're,
it's interesting. I think you're going to see a lot more hybrid events, and there have been some people or some organizations that have been doing this. I know the SAP, the Sapphire conference from SAP, I've gone to for years, and they had actually more virtual attendees than any other conference I had seen, but they had this gigantic, you know, they rented out the whole convention center area, and then had these big live screens. And that's just the kind of thing that I'm sure that you're set up to handle, where you are taking something that's a big event that's live on stage, but you're also spreading it out to the rest of the world.
Yeah, well, and that's the other thing that I would point out. There are times when situations like this, a Zoom call is perfect for what you need to accomplish. But if you're doing an awards gala and, you know, you historically have had 1,000 people in the audience and they have steak and lobster for dinner and they come in their gowns and tuxedos, if you're trying to recreate that, the Zoom environment is maybe not the best. You might need to upgrade and do something more similar to a broadcast that you would see on television. And you have to remember that even though it's virtual, that doesn't mean that it's less expensive, because the technology is actually more complex than what it was for a simple live event, because there's more moving parts to it and more pressure. I will tell you that my crew gets more stressed out. It's very easy to make a mistake in live and have it not be noticed, but it's
Exactly
noticed in this environment.
Oh, well, Heidi, we want to thank you so much for sharing your story today. It's an important story, and thank you for being with us. And with that, we'll let you get back to business, because we know you're still in the middle of running Francis's conference. So,
well, we're done for the day, so I'm going to participate in the chat for a few minutes.
Oh, great. Okay, thank you, and thank you, everybody. And Joanna, I'm going to hand it back to you.
All right, everybody. Well, I hope that was an inspiring story for you all. And, you know, a little takeaway message for me, ladies. I don't know if this is the same for you, but, you know, failure is okay. It's okay to try something and it doesn't work out. You learn from that. You think about what changes need to be made. How can you do it differently? But if you never take that first step, like Heidi is saying, then you'll never know. So that was my big takeaway. What about you, ladies?
Yeah, I think also of note is to just give yourself some time, right? That you don't have to make a decision right now. And part of, you know, along with what you just said, Joanna, part of it is to see, okay, well, I'm going to try this. And if this doesn't work, here's plan B. And if that plan B doesn't work, let's look at plan C. The other thing too is Heidi mentioned that it was really important to her to keep her independent contractors close and still part of her team. And that's another thing too, as business leaders, especially women business leaders, right? Our team is our family, and we go above and beyond for our team members. And it's really important to look at all resources and all possibilities to keep the team going, right? So that you can keep that cohesion.
Yeah, it's true.
One of the takeaways, I love when Heidi said that you have to have the guts to do what you want to do, and being able to follow through on that vision, even if you've had it for a long time, and just kind of go for it and try to make it happen. So thank you very much, Heidi, for all the encouragement and the bravery you showed, and how you were willing to stretch your ideas as far afield as they needed to go to come up with something creative. So that was very inspiring.
Yep, I second that.
Yes, it reminds me of what Terry Daniels said also about how, Nancy, what you're saying, how your employees become your family, and that's what she is saying also, and being a leader in the industry, and is that's something to think about and remember.
Right. And I'll mention one of my favorite books of late, which is The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek. And in it, he quotes the general, the highest ranking naval officer in the US at her retirement, Lori Richards. When he asked her what leadership means, she said, leaders look up and out, and they hire people to look down and in. So as business leaders, our job is to constantly be looking up and out, right? What's next? This is an obstacle, but how can we overcome this obstacle? The other great thing about that book as well is the infinite mindset, the infinite game mindset means you're in it for the long haul, right? It's not just the profit, it's about the purpose and about the people. And I think Heidi is a shining example of that, of this infinite mindset that, okay, the industry is changing. What can I do? What tools, what resources do I have at my disposal that I can use my experience, my team's experience, et cetera, to really fulfill our mission, right? So we didn't ask Heidi this, but I bet you her mission hasn't really changed. The way she is serving has changed, right? But her mission and vision is probably still the same. And I bet for all of our business owners, if you really dig deep and look at it, your mission and vision hasn't changed. What has changed is how you're serving. And there's nothing wrong with changing the how and to, renegotiating that, because that's what keeps businesses alive.
So keep the why, but change the how. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yes.
I love that. I love that.
If I can also add, one of the things that I want to appreciate Heidi for is the fact that, that vulnerability at the very beginning, and to come on calls and to talk to us and use the community for what Nancy and all of us really envision that it be used for, right? A place where you can come and be authentic and, yeah, exactly. So I appreciate her sharing that part of the story as well. And Nancy, you bringing that up because she had a beautiful presence, but it also, I think, is a great example of what we really hope for all of you guys to use the community for. And these virtual, meetups like you guys are having, it's a space for you. So don't be afraid to call us and lean in, and we love to brainstorm.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you everyone for spending your Wednesday at 1 p.m. with us on the windows, and we look forward to seeing you again in the future. And until then, have a great week. Bye.
Everyone.
See you tomorrow.